Some movies arrive quietly, no long lines outside theaters, no big opening weekends, no headlines about box office records. In fact, some of them fail so badly that studios don't even know how to talk about them afterward. And yet, years later, people are still discovering them, recommending them to friends, arguing about what they mean, quoting strange lines, rewatching them late at night. These are the films that didn't fit their time. Too strange, too dark, too uncomfortable, too different. They were misunderstood when they came out, but slowly they found their audience. And today, they're cult classics. Brazil, 1985. Terry Gilliam's Brazil is the kind of movie that makes executives nervous. It's expensive. It's surreal. It doesn't explain itself politely, and it refuses to behave like a normal story. When it was released, the studio didn't know how to sell it. Was it science fiction? A comedy? A political satire? A romance? A nightmare? The answer was yes. Set in a bureaucratic dystopia where paperwork matters more than human life, the film follows Sam Lowry, a quiet government worker who escapes his gray reality through elaborate dreams of flying, heroism, and freedom. On paper, it sounds simple. On screen, it's chaos, in the best way. Endless ducks crawl across ceilings like metal vines. Offices feel like prisons. Technology looks advanced and broken at the same time. Every conversation is interrupted by a form, a stamp, or a malfunctioning machine. Audiences in the 1980s didn't know what to do with it. It cost far more than it earned back. Critics were divided. The studio famously tried to cut it into something more normal, even pushing for a happier ending. Gilliam fought them publicly, and for a while Brazil existed in multiple versions, none of them quite safe from controversy, but something interesting happened over time. People started watching it at home. Film students discovered it. Fans of darker science fiction passed it around like a secret. They recognized what the movie really was, a warning wrapped in absurd humor, not about robots or aliens, but about systems, about how paperwork can become more important than people, about how comfort can slowly replace freedom. Today, Brazil is seen as one of the most important dystopian films ever made, not because it predicted the future perfectly, but because it captured how it feels to live inside a machine you can't escape. Jacob's Ladder, 1990. If Brazil is a nightmare built from paperwork and wires, Jacob's Ladder is a nightmare built from grief. When it was released in 1990, audiences expected a normal psychological thriller. What they got instead was something deeply unsettling. Jacob Singer is a Vietnam veteran living in New York, trying to rebuild his life after the war, but reality doesn't behave properly around him. People flicker, faces twist for a single frame, subway stations turn into hellscapes, memories bleed into hallucinations. The movie never clearly tells you what is real. The studios marketed it poorly. Viewers walked in expecting something straightforward. Many walked out confused or disturbed. It didn't make much money, but the people who connected with it really connected with it. Because beneath the horror imagery is something quiet and devastating, a story about trauma, guilt, and the fear of letting go. Jacob isn't being chased by a monster, he's being chased by memories. As the film's imagery later influenced everything from Silent Hill to Lost Highway, its visual language became part of modern psychological horror. And once people realized what the movie was truly doing, not trying to scare but trying to grieve, its reputation changed. Today, it's widely considered one of the most important psychological films of its decade. A movie that failed at the box office, but succeeded at staying in people's minds for decades. The City of Lost Children, 1995. Some cult classics grow slowly, others feel like they come from another planet. The City of Lost Children looks like a fairy tale that was left out in the rain. It's set in a strange harbor world filled with rusted machinery, cloned men, orphan thieves, mad scientists, and a villain who steals children's dreams to stop himself from aging. The visuals are overwhelming. Green fog, crooked buildings, exaggerated faces, and costumes that look handmade in the best way. When it was released, many audiences didn't know how to approach it. It was French. It was dark. It starred a very young Ron Perlman speaking heavily accented dialogue. And it didn't follow Hollywood rhythm. In theaters, it struggled. But on VHS and late-night cable, it found its people. Artists loved it. Fantasy fans loved it. People tired of predictable storytelling loved it. It didn't treat its audience like customers. It treated them like visitors in a strange world. And once you visit, you don't forget it. Over time, it became one of those films people recommend carefully. You might hate this, but you might fall in love with it. That's cult cinema. Not made for everyone. Made for someone. The Fisher King, 1991. On the surface, The Fisher King looks like a comedy. Robin Williams, Jeff Bridges, New York City. Quirky conversations. The marketing leaned into that, but the movie itself is something else entirely. It's about guilt, about how one careless moment can destroy lives, about how trauma reshapes people, about how some wounds never close. They just become part of who you are. Williams plays Perry, a homeless man whose mind broke after a violent tragedy. Bridges plays a radio host who indirectly caused it. Their connection is awkward, painful, sometimes funny, often uncomfortable. When the film came out, audiences didn't know what tone to expect. Too sad for a comedy, too strange for a drama, too emotional for mainstream success. It underperformed financially, but critics slowly reevaluated it. People revisited it, and they realized something. This wasn't a movie about being broken. It was about learning how to live while broken. Williams' performance in particular became legendary, not loud, not showy, vulnerable in a way that hurt to watch. Today, The Fisher King is often mentioned as one of the most honest depictions of mental trauma in 90s cinema. A film that didn't explode on release, but quietly earned respect. Barton Fink, 1991. Then there's Barton Fink, a movie that doesn't even try to be comfortable. Written and directed by the Coen brothers, it follows a New York playwright who moves to Hollywood to write movies and slowly loses his grip on reality. He lives in a hotel that feels alive. The walls sweat. The hallways echo. His neighbor may be kind, or dangerous, or imaginary. When it was released, it confused people. It won awards at Cannes. Critics admired it, but general audiences didn't show up. It was too slow, too symbolic, too strange. But over time, it became a favorite among filmmakers and cinephiles. A movie about creative frustration, about selling your voice, about the horror of being misunderstood. Some people see it as a metaphor for Hollywood. Others see it as a psychological breakdown. Some see it as a literal descent into hell. The film never confirms any of it, and that's why it lasts. It doesn't give answers. It gives atmosphere. And questions. 12 Monkeys, 1995. By the mid-90s, Bruce Willis was known for being the guy who survives explosions. So when 12 Monkeys arrived, many people expected another straightforward sci-fi action movie. That's not what they got. Instead, they were given a story about time travel that feels more like a mental breakdown than an adventure. Willis plays James Cole, a prisoner sent back from a ruined future to gather information about a virus that wiped out most of humanity. But the past doesn't feel stable. Doctors doubt his story. Strangers seem half aware of things they shouldn't know, and Cole himself isn't sure whether he's a time traveler or simply insane. The movie was strange, pessimistic, and deliberately confusing. It didn't flop completely, but it disappointed studios who expected a blockbuster in the traditional sense. Over time, though, its reputation changed. People began to appreciate how carefully it's constructed, how every scene carries unease, how the film never treats time travel as something clean or heroic, but as something traumatic. You don't jump through time without leaving parts of yourself behind. Brad Pitt's performance, wild and unpredictable, also became iconic, proof that the movie was never trying to be safe. Today, 12 Monkeys is remembered as one of the most intelligent science fiction films of the decade. Not flashy, not comforting, just quietly disturbing. See eXistenZ, 1999. David Cronenberg has never been interested in comfort, and eXistenZ might be one of his most unsettling ideas. On the surface, it's about virtual reality, game pods, artificial worlds, players plugging into living machines. But underneath, it's about something simpler and more frightening. What happens when you can no longer tell where reality ends? And when it came out, audiences compared it to The Matrix, which released the same year. That comparison didn't help. The Matrix was sleek and heroic. eXistenZ was moist, organic, and deeply uncomfortable. Guns made of bones. Cords that connect to human spines. Conversations that suddenly feel scripted by the game itself. People didn't know how to react. Some walked out, some laughed nervously, most stayed away. But Cronenberg fans understood what he was doing. He wasn't predicting technology, he was questioning identity. If your thoughts can be programmed, are they still yours? If your choices come from code, are they choices at all? Years later, the film gained new respect as gaming culture exploded and virtual spaces became normal. What once felt absurd began to feel prophetic, not in details, but in mood. That creeping feeling that reality is thinner than we think. Delicatessen, that's in 1991. Delicatessen is what happens when humor and horror share the same apartment building. Set in a collapsing post-apocalyptic France, the film centers around a butcher who rents rooms to tenants and quietly sells their meat to feed the rest of the building. It's grim, but it's also funny. Darkly, uncomfortably funny. When it was released, many people didn't know how to categorize it. Too strange for mainstream comedy, too playful for serious drama, too stylish for cheap horror. It struggled commercially, but its visual personality was impossible to forget. Yellow-tinted lighting, squeaky floors timed like musical instruments, characters who feel like cartoon drawings that somehow learned to suffer. It became one of those movies passed between friends with a warning. This is weird, but trust me. Over time, it earned its place as a classic of European cult cinema. Not because it's polite, but because it commits fully to its strange little world and never apologizes for it. Dead Man, 1995. Dead Man is a Western, technically, but it moves like a funeral. Shot in black and white, it follows William Blake, an accountant, not a gunslinger, who accidentally becomes an outlaw while slowly dying from a gunshot wound. He drifts across the frontier, guided by a quiet, strange man named Nobody, who believes Blake is already halfway into the spirit world. There are no heroic shootouts, no triumphant music, just long silences, wind, footsteps, regret. When it came out, audiences were confused. They expected horses and action. They got poetry. The movie barely made an impact at the box office, but filmmakers noticed it. Writers noticed it. People who felt tired of loud storytelling noticed it. And slowly, Dead Man became something sacred in film circles. A Western about endings, about identity, about how death doesn't always arrive violently. Sometimes it arrives gently, one quiet mile at a time. Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai, 1999. By the end of the decade, Jim Jarmusch released a movie about a hitman who lives by an ancient samurai code. Forrest Whitaker plays Ghost Dog, a quiet, thoughtful assassin who studies philosophy, feeds pigeons, and serves a mobster who barely understands him. The film moves slowly. There are long pauses, long looks, long walks across rooftops. It doesn't rush. Studios didn't know how to sell it. Was it action? Was it drama? Was it art film? Audiences were unsure. It didn't perform strongly in theaters. But the people who loved it really loved it. Because Ghost Dog isn't a typical killer. He's disciplined, lonely, loyal, out of time. A modern man living by ancient rules in a world that no longer respects any code at all. The film becomes less about crime and more about honor, about what it means to live by principles when society treats everything as temporary. Over time, it became a cult favorite for people who enjoy quiet movies that say more with silence than with dialogue. Most of these films were never meant to be safe. They weren't designed to please everyone. They didn't test well. They didn't fit neatly into marketing categories. And when they failed financially, the industry moved on. But audiences didn't. Somewhere along the way, people started finding them, late at night, on worn-out DVDs. Their recommendations whispered like secrets, and they realized something. A movie doesn't need to be successful to matter. Sometimes the ones that fail the loudest last the longest. Because cult films don't belong to studios. They belong to the people who discover them and never quite forget them.